Welcome, Marcus and Orlando.
Well, I think we're live. Hello and welcome. Bienvenidos, friends of the Hispanic Society, de las Tertulias de Arte Hispano. Thank you, as always, to our members who have joined us monthly, and this is amazing, since May of 2020. And welcome to all of those who are tuning in for the first time. We continue these conversations on the first Tuesday of each month at 6 p.m. If you're not a member yet, please consider joining by going to our website, hispanicsociety.org, one word, hispanicsociety.org, and search for membership under support. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing my co-host, Dr. Orlando Hernández-Ying, who is the Hubert and Mireille Goldschmidt Works on Paper Fellow with additional support of the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. Orlando, want to say hello?
Hi, everyone, and thank you again for allowing me to participate in this talk today. And for everyone else, welcome, and I hope you enjoy the presentation.
Thank you so much. And now, without further ado, I'm going to start having a charla, a little talk about our drawings at the Hispanic Society Museum and Library. They reside, as it were, in the museum department, and there are some 6,200 of them. So we have a very, very important treasure, as we may say, of works of art on paper to go with those in the prints and photographs department and the library. Just give me a moment to start. The motive of our gathering today is a small exhibition we mounted in the American Academy of Arts and Letters, the building next door to us, and our sibling institution, called 400 Years of Master Drawings from the Hispanic Society Museum and Library. And the last day for it to be seen by the public is tomorrow, Wednesday, February 2nd, from 1 to 5 p.m. So I hope you'll come up to 155th Street. You go in the 155th Street entrance and see this remarkable, very select group of drawings, which I will describe now, along with other works in our drawings collection. We begin with the Spanish Golden Age, as is often the case. We have works of art from the 16th through the 21st centuries, or 20th century actually, through the 21st century in our collection in the society. And here you see three of those. Work on the upper left by Giuseppe de Ribera, who was Spanish but worked in Italy. It's a three-color drawing showing David beheading Goliath from his early career in 1624. And below it, a work by Bartolomé Esteban Murillo, the great Spanish artist from mid-century in the mid-1600s, showing a quick sketch that was leading to a large altarpiece called the Four Saints, with St. John the Baptist, St. Justa and Rufina, and St. Francis. Both of these works are promised gifts to the Hispanic Society, and that'll be another elite motif of our talk, the people who have so generously contributed to our collection, beginning with our founder, Archer Milton Huntington, who even after he died, brought works to us, such as this wonderful Immaculate Conception drawing from the 1660s by Murillo again, a bequest of Mr. Huntington, after his death in 1956. We also have designs for architecture and altar ensembles, and these are sometimes among the most interesting drawings. For example, there's this hypnotically beautiful work by Sebastián de Herrera Barnuevo, which shows a crucifixion, and it is actually a plan for a, well, what Wagner would have called a Gesamtkunstwerk, an all-embracing work of art in a chapel somewhere. We assume that the crucifixion would have been sculpted, probably to be painted by Herrera himself. And then there's an architectural or design ensemble at the bottom with some sculpture. And then there'd be a painting behind with all these putti, or little angels, mourning the death of Christ. It is obviously something that Herrera hoped to not only do, but perhaps to contract. Then on the right, we see Alonso Cano, one of the most important artists of the Spanish Golden Age, who was a painter, sculptor, and architect. And at the end of his life, he became a priest at the Granada Cathedral. And this is presumably a design for an altar niche at the Granada Cathedral, where Cano has done the architecture. There's a sculpture, which presumably he expected to sculpt, and paintings. They're not shown in the drawing, but he would have expected to paint them. So it's his same idea as in the Herrera Barnuevo, an architectural study for retablo. And we come to our most recent acquisition, literally a week ago, which is a beautiful Renaissance drawing by Fernão Gomes, who was Portuguese, and did this Annunciation with saints around 1570 to 1590. There's this wonderful cyclical swirling pattern of design anchored by these four very solid saints at the bottom. Moses is one of them. I'm not sure exactly who the others are. There's evangelists, and they're probably intended to be people who defended the concept of the semi-divine nature of the Blessed Virgin Mary. It's a wonderful, beautiful work of art, a large drawing that has come into our collection, the gift of Felipe Esteves Mendez. And we are very thankful to have it. We always are looking to expand our collection of Portuguese art. Now, passing to the 18th century and to Mexico, I'm showing you here out of its frame. That's why the rough edges outside, because it's glued down onto the backing. I'm showing you out of its frame a work by Juan Rodrguez Juarez, the head of the Mexican school in the early 1700s, a Virgin of the Immaculate Conception with saints. He was an escudo de monja, a nun's shield worn on the habits, in this case of Conceptionist nuns in Mexico City. And it is a work of exquisite detail. It's quite small, 6 inches high, but it is monumental, and across the room it has a presence. And you can see, I think even on your television screens or computer screens, that the details are very precise, but also very active in animating the surface, and the coloring is very, very delicate and exquisite. It's also a completely European work of art. We must remember that many of the colonial, or as we prefer to say, viceregal Latin American schools were very closely allied with Europe, not just with Spain, but also with Italy and the Low Countries. And in that international context, I'm showing you here 2 works of art by Spanish artists working in Italy in the mid 1700s. At the bottom is a design for a fan by Francisco La Vega de Delgu, showing the coronation of the Infante Carlos of Spain in the Palermo Cathedral. Now, going back to the beginning of the 1700s, Philip V of the Bourbon dynasty of France became King of Spain. His second wife was Isabel Farnese, Duchess of Parma. And her eldest son, Philip had a family by his first wife as well. Here, her eldest son was this Infante or Prince Carlos, who was also Duke of Parma, and put himself to the task of reconquering Italy from the Austrians for the Spanish crown, which he had completed by 1735 when he was crowned in Palermo in Sicily, king of the two Sicilies, as he would be called today, the king of Naples and Sicily. In 1759, he also became king of Spain, gave the Italian dominions to his son, and went back to Madrid, taking with him, by the way, the entire Capo di Monte porcelain factory. But that's all in the future. To get back to our objects, you can see here that we have not only the drawing, but the fan itself, painted by Amador Sierra after the drawing. They were both the gifts of Miss Clementine Furnace, I think she called herself, in 1912, who was a fan collector. And we have the most exquisite collection of fans. So those of you who are interested should get in touch. Anyway, it seems that La Vega, in addition to providing designs for fans, two of which exist, also was thinking ahead to a graphic art cycle, an etchings or something, because he put this decorative frame around it. But it's also another example of art being intended to move on to something else. Speaking of which, later in the 18th century, we have these two studies by Francisco Baciero, who was Goya's studio mate in the studio in the Royal Palace, run by Baciero's older brother and by Anton Raphael Mengs, principally to provide cartoons or large-scale designs for tapestries. But the work on the left on this blue paper is something else. It is a design or a cartoon for a fresco, exactly like later in the talk, we'll see Jose Clemente Orozco using his designs for frescoes. And in this case, we know that Baciero took it up 70 feet in the air on a scaffolding to use the paint, the dove of the Holy Spirit, coming in through one of the cupolas of Saragossa Cathedral. And you can see just by looking at it, it's a very working tool of a drawing for an artist. It's crumpled, it's stained. It was something the artist used in a larger artistic endeavor. Similarly, but in a somewhat better condition, is the drawing on the right of two very elegant 18th century Spanish women promenading. It is a design for a tapestry cartoon that was actually made, and it is also something that Goya did quite a bit of as a young artist. By the way, the drawing of the dove was a gift of Baroness von Ponce, who gave us some wonderful old master drawings. And once again, the tapestry cartoon was in the bequest of Archer Milton Huntington. Now let's move on to Goya. Francisco de Goya y Lucientes, who lived from 1743 to 1828. The two drawings by Goya out of the 17 we have are in the exhibition, and these are the two drawings that you see now. On the left, you see a majo, a man of the streets, a street dude, if you want to say, watching two of his women, his girlfriends, fight over him. They're tearing each other's hair out, and one of them is using her heel of a high-heeled shoe as a weapon. And he is vastly amused by it. This is part of a large group of drawings leading up to Goya's satirical series, The Caprichos, where he investigates everyday life, including street life. And you see here such an image. What makes the drawing amazing is the weaving of space around the forms of the figures. It's like a waterfall falling down a hill, flowing and bringing us into the composition. He was a master draftsman. His drawings are usually with a brush and ink on very delicate paper, but they don't bleed through because he knew what he was doing. We forget that Goya was a professor at the Art Academy, so that we shouldn't be surprised at his mastery. On the right is another satirical drawing of about a decade later, 1808, 1814, during the Peninsular War, when the Spanish, or War of Independence as they call it, when the Spanish were fighting Napoleon. But in this case, it's a a secular subject of everyday life where I guess we call him a carnival barker almost, a man who you see just looming over this device has a box in which there are panoramic paintings of other places in the world. And you can look in it and see tutti il mondo, all the world. Now, the young lady at lower left is looking at a different landscape, as we may say. Perhaps she's looking at the moon. But in any case, that's where the humor comes in. The man is looking at the world, and she's looking at him or a part of him. We have a wonderful spread of Goya's drawings throughout his career, and I might say in the prints and photographs department, under the steady leadership of Dr. Patrick Lenigan, we have an almost complete series of Goya's etchings and other lithographs. Only one or two objects is missing from a complete set of hundreds. And that's why a work as the one you see in the middle, Hay pulgas, are there fleas, which is part of this group of drawings from 1796 to 97 leading up to the Caprichos, is so informative because not only is it a wonderful, gentle story where the woman's been trying to sleep and something's biting her, and she gets up and looks in her night dress. Is there a flea? What's going on? While her husband snores away in the shadows. But notice the wash, the gray wash on the background, which will become aqua tint in his etchings, a fairly new etching technique that allowed him to create atmosphere in the works of art. On the left, another of these works intended for being engraved, a portrait after Francisco Pacheco, Velázquez's father-in-law and teacher in the 1600s, of a series of famous artists of the Renaissance and Baroque periods in Spain. In this case, Fernando Navarrete, El Mudo, the deaf one, who was a very important late Renaissance Spanish artist. And here is redrawn with great sympathy by Goya after Goya became deaf in 1798 for a series of images of these artists. And then on the right, done during the Peninsular War, the War of Independence against the French, we have this image, tiene prisa de escapar. She's in a hurry to escape. But from what? From the French army coming? Or maybe she just wants to escape from the convent. As usual, Goya leaves it a little ambiguous, lets the viewer think about it. Now, moving on to the period 1812 to 1820, a period of great political strife in Spain when hopes for a progressive future were dashed by Ferdinand VII. We have from album F, also called the Sepia album, a remarkable series of existential images. There's almost nothing in art like album F. The Metropolitan Museum once had it all up on one wall, and they should have had little dishes of Valium out in the gallery. It's just one extraordinarily powerful image over after the other. On the left, we see a man carrying a woman across a waterfall. And we might say this was an enlèvement, as the French put it, a carrying off, an abduction of a young woman. But she's certainly not resisting. In fact, she's rather bored with the whole thing, toying with a lock of his hair while he struggles mightily to get her across this waterfall at the edge of the lake. Now, we know that in Aragon, where Goya was born, there was a marriage custom where the husband carried his bride across the stream. Whether that has something to do with this, we'll maybe never know, but it is an existential image of two people locked in life, and that's where it is so important. On the right is something rather sadder. It's the political torture of a man by a strappato, where his hands are tied behind his back and to a rope going up in the air, and then people who you see laboring mightily to do it, totally engrossed in their work, lift him up and then let him fall and catch him. The arms are dislocated several times. It's a horrible, painful torture. And it shows the political repression of this era of 1812 to 1820. From 1819 to 23, however, there was a liberalization, And we see some more happy images coming out of Goya, such as this remarkable drawing of regocijo, or mirth, happiness, showing a monk and an older woman either floating in the sky or seen, we're floating, looking down on them from above. There's nothing like this in European art, except maybe some of the drawings of Tiepolo at that time. You have to go to Japan or China to find this amazing light existentialism, this floating image. In fact, the Japanese called it the floating world, if you will remember. Finally, after a return of repression in 1823, Goya asked permission to emigrate to Bordeaux in France, where in his 80s, he becomes one of the first artists to perfect the new technique of lithography. And these two drawings are drawn either in a lithographic crayon or a kind of a greasy chalk. In any case, they show the influence of his new artistic endeavors. The one on the left is the old man on the swing, just grinning, having as much fun in his second childhood as he did in his first. And then on the right, this woman and two children, which is also the classical symbol of charity. You see the artist at work communicating symbolically, but the style has just left history. You won't find anything like it until Kathy Kollwitz in the 20th century. Moving over to a contemporary in Mexico, we see Raphael Gimenez, who was a Valencian who became head of the Mexico City Academy, doing a series of studies of a painting of some kind of a noble company arriving at a port. It may be Dido and Aeneas. It's hard to say what it is exactly, but we do see an inventive artist at the top of his powers. And once again, in this case, a person born in Europe, but coming to an academy where the people were already working in a similar style, and in fact, already working in neoclassicism, to lead them forward in progressive art. And now I go away from the exhibition for a moment to look at these works by Pancho Fierro. We have the world's largest collection of Peruvian custom-greased watercolors and associated works, led off by this amazing scroll, 15.5 feet long and 18 inches high, 17.5 inches high. I show you some detail here of this remarkable work, but I'm going to pass on to some of the single leaf watercolors of Pancho Fierro. We're going to have a selection of them in our, we call it Nuestra Casa exhibit, opening on the 17th of February. And you'll be able to see them there. What we've done is we brought our treasures exhibit home and asked a young lady to make a young doctor to make a selection of works that I'll mention at the end of our charla. On the left, you see an Afro-Hispanic woman. Pancho Fierro was himself an Afro-Hispanic and a member of a confraternity of Afro-Hispanics. Here we see a middle or upper middle class equestrian woman of African origin, performing a rather complicated haute école riding pose. In the middle, we see a woman of indigenous origin in the market at Lima, selling peanuts, as it happens. And I show you the detail to give you a sense of how remarkable Pancho Fierro is at capturing personalities. Finally, we have on the right a image of a soldier back from the wars in Ecuador, singing a song of Ecuador, either to his girlfriend or his wife, in the now ease of his home and a hammock. Also, in the exhibition from the 19th century, Spanish still, is this amazing, very large, again, over 1 foot high by 1.5 feet wide, drawing of a tree. It's a tree by Martinrico Yortega, who was a landscape artist principally, also who did views of Venice, who worked in a plein air style, very strongly influenced by Impressionism, but his drawings are really quite radical and forward-looking. It's part of what I call the alternate route to modernism that involves Italy and the east coast of Spain and often the Madrid school as well. The work forms a gestalt of an image popping off against the ground behind, and has an amazing abstract quality and dynamism to it, and therefore looks forward to the 20th century as well, as do the works of Sorolla. In the case of these particular works, they were painted in the 20th century. On the left, we see a view of the Plaza Hotel and a corner of Central Park, painted by Sorolla from his window in the Savoy Hotel, which is no more. It's now the GE building. You think of it perhaps as the FAO Schwartz building. But anyway, it was the Savoy Hotel, and that's what he saw at his window, and he wanted to capture it, and he grabbed a piece of cardboard that he had just taken out of his shirt that came from the laundry to keep it stiff and unwrinkled, and he painted a gouache for Mr. Huntington on that shirt cardboard. Next to it is a view from 1911, the same visit to America in 1911, where he shows that one of the first ideas for our mural cycle, Sorolla's mural cycle, The Vision of Spain. When after we get going again, as our reconstruction progresses, if you haven't by any chance seen the Sorolla Room, that has to be way up on your list of things to do in New York. A remarkable place. And I'm showing you at the bottom right a work that's not in the exhibit, of which we have nearly 70 large-scale gouaches for the mural studies. This one is 4 feet high and over 6 feet wide. We have others that are 4 feet high and 24 feet wide. They're really remarkable, vivid, expressionist brushwork and wonderful colors, abstract, modern works of art, which leads us to another 20th century artist, a younger contemporary of Sorolla, Jose Clemente Orozco. And I want to say the next 6 objects I'm going to show you are part of a larger gift of Orozco drawings that were generously given to us by Michael and Salma Warnick of Sonoma, California, just at the end of last year. And they are, as Orlando, I'm sure, will confirm, really, really hypnotically beautiful, interesting, and inspiring works of art. So let's look at them. Here are the ones that are in the exhibit now. On the left, we have one of a number of figure studies and designs for murals. Now we're back to Goya. We're back to Baciero. We're back to Cano. We're working in a mode that old master artists worked in, that Sorolla worked in, and now here we see Orozco as one of the muralists, Orozco, Rivera, Siqueiros, Dr. Atl, working the same way. That tradition into modernism is very important to keep in mind. And we have this touching image of 2 workers, presumably agricultural workers, with a man with his arm around presumably his wife, with this tender embrace that the artist is focused on. It's really a beautiful, moving work of art. And on the right, a real working drawing where he's just trying to get that hand right around the beam. And of course, as an academically trained artist, he does it by drawing. These are large, 22 inches high, the size of middle-sized easel paintings, and really very commanding works. Here are 2 more from the 1930s now. Others were from the 20s. A right arm clutching what seems to be a knife. We're working on identifying it as to where it was destined for. Notice how well he handles the anatomy. And then on the right, a study for the mural Man of Fire, 1939, the drawing 37 to 39, where he's getting the final version of the central cupola just right. And here you see it. Here's the thing, and if you focus on the middle, I don't know, can you see my, no, I can't put my cursor in. There's the very identical anatomy in the middle where he's used the drawing to make the fresco. And even this withered arm, which is snaking across the bottom of the drawing, is found in the final version in fresco, 50 or 60 feet up in the air. It's a huge place, in Guadalajara, the cultural center of the Cabanas, in Guadalajara, Mexico, Orozco's hometown. And then some academic figure studies from the 1940s, one of a warrior and a female nude on the left. You can see throughout his career, Orozco getting back in touch with Picasso. And this drawing really is very close to Picasso's similarly classical drawing of the 1920s. And then this very casual study of a female nude. He's posed the model in two ways. And with just the minimum of brushwork evoked the female form, in this case, the human form in his drawing. Finally, we have in the donation stunning portraits, figure studies, and here are two of the best. One of a model named Rosario, who may have been a family member. Here he's working on conveying emotions and the contact between the viewer and the sitter. And then a more removed image on the right, which in spite of its dreamlike quality is really stunning. When you walk into the gallery, it hits you. It's in gouache, a type of watercolor paint, and it has touches of color, which reminds us of the incredible power of Orozco's color in his murals. We don't know who the sitter is. I might say that our watercolor collection, as I mentioned, goes right up into the 21st century. And this summer, we will have an exhibition of watercolors, which run from 1900 to the present day and include artists from our collection who were inspired to go to Spain by the works in the Hispanic Society, particularly the works of Joaquin Sorolla. And this includes a child Hassam, who went to Spain in 1910 after seeing Sorolla's exhibition in 1909, showing a bridge at Ronda in Andalusia. In the middle, George Wharton Edwards, who worked with Mr. Huntington as an illustrator. And we have a number of incredibly beautiful, large-scale, again, drawings by him, watercolors, rather, by him, painted in a technique that looks almost like pastel. Here, the Alcázar Tower in Cordova. And then finally, a contemporary artist, one of two in the exhibition, Timothy J. Clark, showing the Transparente in Toledo Cathedral, a gift of Leslie and Betsy Roy just last year, only a few months after it was made. Very generous of the Roys to do that. And I hope you will see this summer this remarkable exhibition, which will continue into September and will offer opportunities for also enjoying the terrace and so forth of the society. Well, let me stop the sharing and have one final word here. I am very grateful for your ears, for listening to me, but I'd also like to invite you to see the drawings, which is the main reason we're here. The exhibition at the American Academy of Arts and Letters, and the last day is tomorrow, Wednesday, February 2nd. It was only open for a few days, with the motive being the Drawings Week that has been here in New York for the last 10 days, actually. The exhibition is open from 1 to 5 p.m. And now I invite Orlando to join us in a charla, a tertulia, as a charla always, a conversation about the works of art.
Marcus, thank you very much. And thank you for to all our generous donors that have been very active last year, helping us build this collection with a tremendous breadth of artists and artistic traditions, you know, that are coming from different latitudes. And you know, I would like to ask you to explain a little bit of the background of our collection of drawings, and how and what is the thread that connects all of the works that we have dealt with in this particular exhibit.
Well, I think the 6,200 leaves, fewer accession numbers, but we have books of drawings from the 1600s and 1700s. But the collection, the first place, is ethnographic. Like everything else in the Hispanic society, it describes the Hispanic world. And like everything else in Hispanic society, it's global. We have new drawings from one from the 1600s and one from the 1700s from the Philippines, for example, not to mention Latin America and so forth. The other aspect of it is that it relates to the many, many different media and techniques that the Hispanic society exhibits, so that we have drawings that relate to decorative arts. And you saw the fan already. We have drawings that relate to fetes and public spectacles, to bullfighting, to the theater. We have a particularly rich collection of works on dance that were also enhanced by a donation from Alessandra Greco, the daughter of Jose Greco, who gave us 70 works by a man named Capulete, Jose Manuel Capulete, stage designs and costumes for the Jose Greco Ballet and Flamenco group. That's just an example of these kind of themes that we can get. I might also say that the artists represented in our collection, whether in the museum department, painters and sculptors, such as Cano and Murillo, and Rivera, and Sorolla, of course, Rico, Goya, Vallejo, all of them, we have drawings related to these artists for whom we have paintings and sculpture. And also we have drawings related to artists for whom we have prints and even photographs in the prints and photographs department. So there's that relationship as well. But it also shows Mr. Huntington as an encyclopedic collector. And I like to think it's interesting. He started out with coins and then went on to stamps. Of course, prints and drawings are kind of a stamp kind of thing. It's a very small work of art on paper or stamp, but you see what I'm talking about. There's a continuity there.
Absolutely. It's also remarkable that the medium, not only, well, being the most elemental of the elements of art, drawing, it serves both purposes as a sketch or a preparatory piece for something bigger, or it stands alone as a work of art on its own. And I don't know, what can you tell us about, I get a very particular feeling in terms of when I see these sketches or drawings, I kind of see more of a direct impression on the brushstroke from the artist than in the finished work. You really see the first intention. What can you share with us in those
ironically, the two-dimensional artistic media that are most direct are drawing and fresco. A fresco is a large-scale watercolor. And there's no mixing of paint. You put watercolor, you put pigments in water and paint them on plastic. So there again, Orozco, you shouldn't be surprised that the drawings are so wonderful, because he was able to draw the size of a billboard. So that's part of it right there. But also I think with Spanish drawings, they're often really tools. And you get a sense of that action painting, that sense of doing it. As other artists, we have linseed oil spots on them, and you can see them ripped up and re-put together. Sorolla cut out figures and silhouettes and pasted them into his gouaches. It's Jackson Pollock, right? It's an active, expressive kind of thing, but it's meant as a root to something. But then we have a number of drawings, and in the exhibition as well, the Sebastian Herrera Barnuevo crucifixion, for example, is intended as a work of art in its own right. Giuseppe de Ribera's David and Goliath is intended as a work of art in its own right. If you don't want him to paint the picture, well, buy the drawing, or buy my print after it.
The Escudo de Monja is also at that level.
They may not have had him paint it in oil, and then they said, "Oh, this is great. We'll just use that."
Absolutely.
Put it in a tortoiseshell frame,
superb,
which we had to take off in order to ship it because of the sea turtles are endangered species. So what I'm saying is that these are works of art in their own right. The Woman in a Blue Blouse by Orozco, I don't think that was leading to a painting at all. I think that's the work of art. That's what we're intended to see. At any rate, it deserves to be, you know. And we have a lot of those in the collection that that enhance the viewer's pleasure, because there you really are just transported in time back to the first person who saw it.
Well, I would like to also take the opportunity to, make a more public, the breadth of the collection that we have, that also serves to understand and study, the work of all these great masters of art in Spain and the Americas and the Hispanic world. That we see there really like the first intentions, the first concepts, and then we can compare them with the finished work and see the process of how things mature. And I think that that's a wonderful opportunity for art historians to really see a work in progress, or something that leads to a bigger project.
But you also know the nice thing about drawings is you can use them to compare it to the works of other artists in the context of the artist's life. So in the fall, when we present the entire Michael and Salma Warnick gift of Orozco drawings in an exhibition in our temporary exhibition gallery, where the Nuestra Casa show of our treasures will be in 10 days, a little over 10 days. When we have that exhibition there, we'll also include not only a painting we have by Orozco, but also works of other artists associated with Orozco, including a whole group of his Spanish contemporaries with whom he has a rather close relationship. So that once again, drawings make connections. They make connections within the work of the artist, and they can make connections out. And it's very common of an artist to give a drawing to another artist in exchange for that drawing.
I would like to remind our guests that please send us your questions or comments through the chat, and then they will be delivered or forwarded to Marcus so he can answer. And also, I would like to point out something that I find truly fascinating, that is the connection, in two different spheres, two different time periods, and two different places, but we see the similarities between Goya and Orozco in terms of both lithographers, both caricaturists. They make a criticism of the society in which they are and their flaws, and at the same time they can be high level, high quality artists in their own right, and create this marvelous works of art in different media, but they have that social conscience that I think reveals that the modernity that is coming out and makes drawing a more, let's say, more democratic art form, that serves the purpose of criticizing, the society, politics, and the powers that be, but at the same time it's accessible. It's less expensive than the finished work, and I think that they connect in that way as well.
Do we have any? Are you there, Sophia? Do we have any chat?
Hi. Yes.
Do we have any questions from chat?
Yes, so we have one question that says, the numbers on some of the drawings, some seem to be identifying places in a sequence by the artist, others perhaps related to place in a collection, perhaps a museum or private collection.
Well, yes, that's a bit complicated, of course. In the case of Goya, his works were collected into albums by his family and pasted onto sheets of beautiful pink paper, actually. And so sometimes those numbers were either put on by him after he'd gathered them in the portfolios, or by his son or grandson. In some cases, they're his numbers, especially as we get closer to the caprichos. When there's a drawing for the capricho, there's some relationships. Then with in other cases, what we have is collectors who have collected them after the fact and numbered them for whatever reasons. In the old days, there was a tendency for a collector to actually put a stamp on the front of the work of art, the way that the Chinese emperors put their stamps on old master paintings in China, to kind of give them, I guess, some quality, or give some heritage or whatever. And a number of these are readily recognizable. and are sort of a guarantee of authenticity. So those numbers, especially with the Goyas, which almost all have them, are generally the ones from the albums. But in some cases, there's more than one number. The number that was on there before it went to the album, as he was playing around to make series, and then the number from the album. I'm trying to think of the Soroyas. I don't think that happens. I don't remember numbers on the Orozcos. There are some dates, and there's one or two inscriptions that were put on by later hands explaining what you're looking at. But I'm going around the room now. I don't think that's the case there. I hope I answered your question. If not, ask it again and we'll refine it.
We have another question, and I believe it's related to the Bartolomé Esteban Murillo drawing for saints. And the question is asking, Moses is a saint? I think maybe that was mentioned before.
That's complicated. Yes, Moses is a saint. All the Old Testament prophets and patriarchs are saints in that sense. They're people in heaven who could technically pray for you, you understand. Often in painting, they're shown with square halos or other devices to show that they're Old Testament, that is, say, before the birth of Christ, saints. The Virgin Mary's parents, Anna and Joachim, are in this category. They were alive before Christ was, although they lived into Christ's era. So those are very two important saints because of the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception. David is a figure that is often shown as a saint with a halo and a harp. So that technically there's this category of Old Testament divine persons, of whom Moses is the top of the list. He's the one who brought the law that established the Hebrew religion that became Judaism. But the prophets, especially Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, are often in this category. It's a little, in that particular drawing, it's a little hard to know what they're looking at. Are they looking at big books, in which case they are evangelists or doctors of the church? In the case of that first figure with a long beard and all that, looking very Michelangelo-esque, he seems to be holding a tablet. So one speculates when you see that kind of thing that it is Moses. And yes, the company of saints mixes Old Testament and New Testament, and of course, in the life of the church, divine personages.
Great. And I think our last question is about how curating these artists that are so geographically different, how challenging was that? And if you could speak more to that.
What do you think, Orlando?
Well, I think that you summarized it pretty well a few minutes ago. The breadth of the Hispanic world and how this tradition has become a globalized one, it gets images and traditions that are easily readable between people from different latitudes and coming even from different centuries, as I mentioned before, between the similarities between the vision of Goya and Jose Clemente Orozco, making cartoons and criticizing their society. Goya inventing lithography and Jose Clemente Orozco practicing lithographies, which was a more mechanical process, and at the same time it added a new medium to the possibilities of art, and at the same time being capable of painting mural cycles, the large-scale paintings, royal portraits in the case of Goya, but magnificent nationalistic monumental frescoes in the case of Orozco. So they have this wide range of possibilities, ideas, and strength, and at the same time, finding those elements in the energetic and expressive brushstroke of both of them is like I think it's enough to create a thread through many of the artists that are represented in this collection. So that's just to mention on a few.
You know, I was asked as we were doing the show if the drawings of other artists in the exhibition were meant to contrast with Orozco. I said, oh no, absolutely not. They were intended to be a continuum. They were showing artists doing the same thing, often thinking in the same ways. I mean, you can't think of a more critical artist of the failings of society, and especially of politics, than Goya.
Yeah.
I mean, it just is clear that Orozco is part, and other modern artists, whoever you want to choose, are part of a continuum of artistic endeavors.
Absolutely. Yes.
And there's, you know, I should have added when we were talking about the collection here, that at a critical stage in the society's history, after Mr. Huntington had just died, his nephew, or rather his wife's nephew, A. Hyatt Mayer, became president. But he was also a curator of the works of art on paper at the Metropolitan Museum, so that the emphasis put on the drawings collection continued. And then, of course, my predecessor, she was the curator of the museum, or senior curator. I'm the senior curator emeritus now. She was a specialist in drawings. And so that all of this has a very direct line in the collection of people who care about works of art, who understand their communicative powers and their beauty and their fragility.
Yes.
Although if you keep it dry and away from fire, paper is really very permanent. It can last a long time, but you've got to take care of it.
Absolutely.
And that's been done. And so that's why we have this remarkable treasure.
Yes, I also would like to ask that same interest of these three artists to reproduce, you know, the people from the street, the common folk, is also something that is picked up, or is the backbone of Pancho Fierro's work as well. So we see this, you know, continuous legacy of observing more or less the same types, trying to reproduce them very faithfully, to the point that they seem to connect with them, you know, as one of their own. And I think that's a beautiful thing about the power of drawings, and that kind of like immediate observation.
You know, every artist I know who's worth anything keeps a sketchbook in his or her back pocket or purse. And you see, especially Soroya's hand never stopped. And everyone I know, whether it's a neo-expressionist artist from San Antonio, a young man, or whether it's Timothy Clark, the watercolor I showed you, or really, really, really abstract conceptual artists, boy, they have a notebook and they are drawing. And it is, drawing is a type of epistemology. It's how artists know the world, how the artist puts the world into his or her hand, literally, and then onto a piece of paper. And you have to love them, but you can't have them on exhibit forever. They're fragile that way. And you need to appreciate them while you can. And that's tomorrow, Wednesday, from 1 to 5 p.m. at the American Academy of Arts and Letters. I think your address is 643 West 155th Street, but it's the building just past ours as you walk down towards the river. So I want to thank you for joining us today. The next Tertulia will be on the first Tuesday of March. And Alex Campos will be in touch with you as to its theme and its leaders. And in the meantime, keep safe and keep thinking about the Hispanic society and about the arts of the Hispanic world. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus, for your wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.